Today we want to look at some of the things that can go wrong when taking a sample survey. So random sampling eliminates bias, but even a large random sample will give a result that differs from the truth of a population. So once we see the magic words randomly selected, do we know we have trustworthy information? There are two types of errors that we're going to look at. First one is called sampling errors. These types of errors occur during the process of taking a sample. This is what causes sample results to be different from the results of a census. The other type are called non-sampling errors. These types of errors are not related to gathering a sample. And these errors can occur even if you did take a census. Our sampling errors are as follows. We have random sampling error, bad sampling method, and undercoverage. On the non-sampling error side, we have a processing errors, response errors, non-response errors, and finally wording of questions. So the first sampling error we want to look at is random sampling error. This is the variation due to chance in choosing a random sample. So for example, Jack takes an SRS of the class's heights and gets a mean of 66.5 inches. Mary takes another SRS of the same class's heights and gets a mean of 70.4 inches. Jack and Mary had different results even though they both took an SRS from the same population. This is due to variation by chance. The next error is called bad sampling methods, which we're very familiar with. These are sampling methods that cause bias, which are not representative of the population. The two we've looked at are voluntary response samples and convenience samples. This error is easy to reduce because we can choose methods that are unbiased, such as SRS, methods that are random or based on chance. Remember, if you're asked to describe how to design a study leads to bias, you're expected to identify the direction of the bias, whether or not it's an overestimate or an underestimate, and the reasons behind your thinking. Before we discuss the next type of error, we want to look at sampling frame one more time. Remember, a sampling frame is a list of all the individuals from which we choose our sample. So, assume below is the sampling frame of students in the class. We randomly choose 5 individuals below to participate in the taste test. Ideally, the sampling frame should list every individual in the population. However, we know that's not always possible. So this leads us to error number 3, undercoverage. This occurs when the sampling frame leaves out some groups in the population. So, for example, generating a random sample from AP Statistics and AP Calculus classes for a survey that wants to know how many students at Lake Braddock own calculators. So our population is Lake Braddock students, but our sampling frame consists only of AP Statistics and Calculus classes. This would have an overestimate because students in these classes are required to have a calculator. Students who are not required to have a calculator are left out of the sampling frame. Please pause here and take a moment and go through and see if you can correctly identify the sampling errors that are being described in each scenario. Now let's look at non-sampling errors. The first one we discuss is processing error. These are mistakes in mechanical tasks. For example, this would be mathematical errors or entering responses into a computer incorrectly, or typos. Our next error is called a response error. This is when a subject gives an incorrect response. So for example, people may lie, they misunderstand the question, they may remember incorrectly, or maybe the question is sensitive and therefore they may not be telling the entire truth. Error number 3 is called a non-response error. This is actually the most serious type of error. This is a failure to obtain data from an individual selected for a sample. Examples include when subjects can't be contacted, they refuse to cooperate, they won't answer the phones or questions, or if you're trying to interview people in a gated community, this may be impossible because it's a gated community. So if you think about all those telemarketers that have been calling your house to try to get data, they're probably getting a lot of non-response error because people just hang up on them. Our last one is called the wording of questions. Wording is the most important influence on the answers given in a sample survey. So confusing or misleading questions can greatly change a survey's outcome. Examples. So Fox News asked, do you support a government-run health insurance plan? 44% of the respondents said yes. The New York Times asked, do you support a government-administered health insurance plan, something like Medicare coverage that people 65 and older get? 66% said yes. Even though these two questions are basically asking the same thing, the way in which they're presented yielded very different responses. So take a moment and go through these scenarios, decide which type of non-sampling error is described, and then check your work. Scenario G goes like this. A survey paid for by makers of disposable diapers found that 84% of the sample opposed banning disposable diapers. Here's the actual question. It is estimated that disposable diapers account for less than 2% of the trash in today's landfills. In contrast, beverage containers, third-class mail, and yard waste are estimated to account for about 21% of the trash in landfills. Given this, in your opinion, would it be fair to ban disposable diapers? Explain how the wording of the question could result in bias. Be sure to specify the direction of the bias. By making it sound like disposable diapers are not a problem in the landfill, the question will result in fewer people suggesting we should ban them. Therefore, this is an underestimate of what probably is true about the population. One last thing to keep in mind. On the AP exam, just correctly naming the error will often result in no credit on the AP exam. You need to make sure that you're clearly explaining the error in context of the question.